Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Matty here from Chilled TCG. Today we're going to be taking a look at a deck list for a Single-Strike Urshifu Vmax new card that's coming out in Battle Styles in March. Now, I covered the Rapid Strike Urshifu Vmax in a previous video last week where we covered a deck list that I made for that version of Urshifu Vmax. This time we're going to be doing the exact same thing, but we're taking a look at the Single-Strike version. Both decks are very cool. They're new decks, fighting type decks, of course. However, they're actually very different in their play style and what the cards do. So I definitely enjoy the cards from the new Battle Style set. They're definitely super cool. The Urshifus are my favorite. There are some other cool decks that we will take a look at in the future. But since I covered the Rapid Strike one last week, I figured this week we'll take a look at the Single Strike one, and we'll just go from there. But definitely, guys, after you're done watching this video, or if you're more interested in the Rapid Strike version, go check out the video that I did there. There'll be an annotation like above or something up there. I don't know. But anyway, guys, let's get right into it. Now, sort of the point of Single-Strike Urshifu Vmax, which is a direct sort of counter sort of idea to the Rapid Strike one, is you're doing less attacks for sure, with higher energy cost. However, these attacks are doing much more damage. So instead of doing, of course, Rapid Strike, hitting multiple times and chipping away at your opponent, Single Strike aims to attack very few times while potentially one-hit KOing a lot of cards in the format, and potentially all cards in the format. So Single Strike, in my opinion, isn't as viable as the Rapid Strike one, but we don't know yet, so I could be wrong. Both decks are definitely going to be pretty impressive. Now, I do want to say, before we get into it, sorry, it's taking a while. Before we get into it, guys, the deck list that I built here might not be the best way to play Single Strike Urshifu. I'm not saying this is by far going to be the best way to play it. However, I wanted to incorporate some of the new cards that are in the set, that are coming out in Battle Styles, which, in my opinion, are really cool, even though they might not be as viable as some of the older cards that we have. So I definitely urge you to go take a stab at this deck and try to build it yourself. And let me know in the comment section below what you would change and how you would play Single Strike Urshifu Vmax. To get into it, though, we're going to take a look at Urshifu V, the Single Strike version. So similar to the Rapid Strike, it's got 220 HP, retreat cost of 2, weak 2 psychic, and it is a fighting type Pokemon. That first attack there, Laser Focus. So for 1 fighting energy, you search your deck for up to 2 fighting type energy cards and attach them to this Pokemon, and then you shuffle your deck. So that's actually a very good attack. This is definitely a Pokemon that we want to start our game with. We also, with this deck, definitely want to go second. This attack is actually very ideal for us. We really just got to hope that we don't get KO'd on our second turn by our opponent. That's going to be really clutch. If we're playing something maybe like Eternatus or maybe like some sort of Welder decks that can, potentially get that KO on turn 2, then we'll obviously maybe not go for this attack with Urshifu in the active spot. We'll try to keep it on the bench and we'll try to set it up from there. But otherwise, this attack is actually really good. And then the second attack there for 2 fighting and a colorless, impact below 180, and then during your next turn, this Pokemon cannot use this attack. Of course, like Zacian, you just have to switch in and out, and you can use the attack, but hopefully we're never needing to use this 3 energy attack. With Urshifu V, we're going to want to evolve into Urshifu Vmax, right? That definitely makes a bit more sense. That attack's actually not that terrible, though. But anyway, now let's move on to the star of the show, Urshifu Vmax. Now, like the Rapid Strike version, again, it's got 330 HP, fighting type Pokemon, weak to Psychic. However, the retreat cost of the Single Strike version is 3 and not 2. This makes it so we cannot use Air Balloon, and it's really the reason why we're not running Air Balloon in this deck. If the retreat cost was 2, this would be honestly a bit more viable, or a bit better in my opinion. I think it's still viable. But let's take a look at the attack. So that first attack for 3 energy, beat down 100 damage, 3 colorless. Now this isn't an attack that we necessarily want to do, but I guess if we can only have 3 energies on, we're going to do it. Although the second attack for Urshifu V is much better. You do 180. Keep that in mind. But the second attack there is the star of the show. It's definitely the reason why we run Urshifu Single Strike Vmax. Now for 3 fighting and a colorless, that's 4 energy. You do 270 damage. You discard all energy from this Pokemon, and this attack's damage isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon. This means that we're hitting for 270 no matter what Pokemon that we're hitting, and that's very important. No matter what sort of damage reduction modifiers they have on there. I believe tool cards, it says effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, so I don't believe like tool cards like Metal Goggles works. I don't think Luke Metal can survive a hit from this thing. No matter what, this thing is looking to take 1-hit KOs on anything in the format. 270 damage is a lot of obviously a lot of damage, but a lot of Pokemon do have more HP than 270, so we are running a variety of damage modifiers in this deck. Next up, though, we're going to be moving on to our Houndour and Houndoom line. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down so I read it correctly. I don't want to get anything wrong here. So we're running a 3-3 lineup. Of course, in Urshifu, we're running a 4-3 lineup before I get into Houndour. We're doing this because, of course, I don't necessarily think you need a 4th VMAX. We're never really probably going to be using more than 2. And we honestly probably don't even want to attack more than twice, maybe 3 times in a game. But so 3 VMAX makes a lot of sense, but Urshifu V, it's definitely a card that we want to have on our first turn, and we want to get that energy attachment onto it. It's very important that we do that since it's a little bit harder to accelerate energies to these guys, and that is going to be the reason why we're running a 4 count of the V. That's just something that we kind of want to start in our hand with. Okay, so now onto the Houndour. We're running a 3-3 line of Houndour. This is a very important card of the deck. It's going to be our energy acceleration engine. Houndour, I'm not really going to talk too much about it. It's a rapid strike card. We just play it so we can evolve into Houndoom. Houndoom is super cool. So 130 HP on this guy, retreat cost of 2. None of that is super important. The attack there for Dark and a Colorless Darkness Fang, 50 damage. We're not going to be attacking with this thing. We can't, or I guess we can even, but we're never going to be doing that. We play it for the ability. Single-Strike Reward. Now, it reads, once during your turn, you may search your deck for a Single-Strike energy card and attach it to one of your Single-Strike Pokemon. And this would be Urshifu V or Vmax. And then you shuffle your deck, and if you attach an energy to the Pokemon this way, you put 2 damage counters onto it. The damage counters aren't super ideal, but realistically, if you put 2 energies onto your Urshifu Vmax, that's... what is it? That's 40 damage, so you go down to 290. Not extremely ideal, but most things still probably aren't going to be able to knock you out, so that's important. Keep that in mind. But this thing is incredibly important to the deck, and thank you very much to Thomas Brophy and Gabriel Smart, good friends of mine, who actually reminded me that this is a card that you can use more than once if you have multiple Houndooms on your bench. It's not something like Octillery, where you can only use the ability once per turn. You can only use this ability once per Houndoom per turn. And that's very important. This means that we can accelerate multiple single-strike energies to our Urshifu Vmax. We'll get into single-strike energy in a bit, but spoiler, it does increase the damage that you do, so that energy is very important. This energy acceleration is extremely important, and Houndoom is going to be very good for this deck. That's why we're running a 3-3 lineup. We might never put more than 2 onto our bench. We don't want to clog up our bench too much, because we do have some other Pokemon that we would like to put down there, but I think having at least Houndoom on your bench is going to make this deck much more consistent, and it's going to be a much more viable deck. Next up, we are going to take a look at the Emboar. So let me scroll up. There we go, Emboar. So we're running a 1-1-1 lineup of this guy. It's not a card that we honestly always need to evolve into, but just in case, we play the long game in 5 or 6 turns from the start. 5 or 6 turns into the game, we can definitely most likely get this thing onto our bench. We do have other ways to do it, and we'll talk about Mustard in a minute. But for now, we're just running a 1-1 lineup of Emboar. Again, we're not going to be attacking with this thing. We don't have the energy to do so. However, we're playing it for its ability, Fighting Fury Stance. Now, Fighting Fury Stance is honestly incredible. It just reads that your single-strike Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon before applying weakness and resistance. This is huge. 30 damage is an incredible modifier. This brings Urshifu Vmax up to 300 without any of the special energy cards, without Dojo. 300 damage just for having an Emboar on your bench is absolutely crazy. It's also got 180 HP, so that's pretty impressive. That means that a lot of things really aren't going to be able to gust it up and get a KO on it. It's probably not something that your opponent's really ever going to target on your bench, and for that reason, it can't get hit by Cramorant and a few other cards. So for that reason, honestly, getting an Emboar on your bench is honestly pretty safe. I don't feel like your opponent's going to be going for it. They're probably going to be targeting your Urshifu Vmaxes because those things are the biggest threats. So I think just a 1-1 lineup is fine. Of course, if you prize them, it's going to be a little bit of a trouble. But at the same time, guys, we have plenty of other damage modifiers in our deck, and getting one prized isn't going to be, or getting any of these prized isn't going to be that big of a deal, especially considering that you might just draw the prize cards. If you do prize your Tepig, and you don't draw it in your prize cards, that might be an issue later on, but it's just sort of, something that we're going to have to deal with, or at least that I'm choosing to deal with this deck list. Of course, we're running the Dene GX, one of those, as well as an Emboar, or sorry, not an Emboar, an Eldegoss V. These are kind of our 2 prize support Pokemon. They're cards that we don't necessarily always want to play every game, but they're there if we need them, sort of as fail safes. Boss's Orders is going to be very important with this deck, especially considering that you really only want to attack hopefully twice for 6 prizes in the game. Of course, this deck will struggle with single prize Pokemon archetypes, which is just something that this deck really can't get around too well, whereas the Rapid Strike version can get around very easily. So that's sort of one downside to this deck. But if you're going against other VMAX decks or tag team Pokemon decks, this deck is this Urshifu Vmax is going to do very well. So I think we kind of focus on what we do well, and we try not to focus on things that we don't do well, I guess, is the point here. However, we play an Eldegoss and a Dedenne. Realistically, if we think about it, we're probably only playing 2 Urshifus on the board during a game. That's 2 bench spaces, and that's only if they're on the bench at the same time. Keep in mind, we're going to play 2 Houndooms on our bench, so that is a total of 4 Pokemon. And then we're going to be hopefully putting our Emboar down, that's 5, and then we have 1 bench space left to potentially play out a Dedenne if we need it, or an Eldegoss if we need it. And like I said, Boss's Orders is going to be very important for this deck. We also run Escape Rope, so that's not too much, hopefully, of an issue, but again, like I said, that last bench space is going to be used for that Dedenne or the Eldegoss, probably in the late game if you need to dig for the card that you need, probably Boss, which it kind of works for both ways, right? If you know you have 1 left in deck, you can dig with Dedenne if it's in your hand, if you have access to it, or Eldegoss if you've already played a Boss's Orders. And that's kind of the idea, is that last bench space is to find, or is for Dedenne or Eldegoss to find that last Boss's Orders at the end of the game if you need it, which you probably might. Because that's sort of how most games go these days. So that's our Pokemon lineup. We're running 7, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, I think like 17 or 18 Pokemon, I can't count. It's a lot of Pokemon in this deck, but we are running a variety of Pokemon search cards, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Before we get into that, though, we are running 4 switch cards as well as 2 escape ropes. Now, this card, like I said, we don't have access to... of course, Air Balloon for free retreat. Retreating is not something that this deck necessarily loves to do. A lot of our support Pokemon also have multiple energies in their retreat costs. Like Houndoom's got 2, Emboar has 4. So Switch and Escape Rope are going to be very valuable to us. Prizing a few of these, if we prize like 2 or 3 of these cards during a game, we're gonna struggle quite a bit. But there wasn't just a lot of space to put any more cards. Air Balloon just didn't really seem that viable in the deck. So 4 switch cards and Escape Rope, it seems like enough. 6 switching options. I guess it's not entirely terrible. But that is our switching up, our cards that we're using to switch around in the deck, which, of course, all decks need switching with paralysis, and status conditions and overall just sort of getting locked in the active spot. We definitely want a variety of switching cards. Switch, of course, is a staple, but the Escape Rope is new to Battle Styles. It's being reprinted, and Escape Rope also kind of has the same effect as Boss, where we force our opponent to switch into one of their bench Pokemon. So this can honestly be kind of used to force them to go into one of those 3-price Pokemon if we play it smart, or if the situation occurs where it just sort of works out like that. But for the most part, it's just there for the switching capability. We can Escape Rope then Boss, or switch and Boss. It's just another way to play switch cards. In a deck like this, I think it's pretty important. Can also be clutch offensively or defensively. And then on to our Pokemon search. We got 4 Quick Balls and 3 Pokemon Communications. We do have quite a bit of basic Pokemon in our deck, so 4 Quick Balls seems, obviously pretty legit. We're definitely going to be wanting to get some Houndours on our bench, maybe the Tepig, and most definitely some Urshifu Vmaxes. So 4 Quick Balls makes total sense. However, we're running a wide variety of different Pokemon in our lists, and a lot of Pokemon that are evolution Pokemon between the Urshifu Vmax, Houndour, Emboar, and I forget the middle evolution's name for Tepig, but those are all Pokemon that we can use and find with Pokemon Communications, and we're oftentimes going to have at least one Pokemon in our hand, right? So Pokemon Communications makes a good amount of sense in my mind. I guess you can run Evolution Incense because we are running a lot of Evolution Pokemon, but Pokemon Communications seems to make more sense because it kind of goes both ways. If we start our hand with a lot of Evolution Pokemon, we can Pokemon Communication for the basics instead of having to Quick Ball and keep those in our hand. So, again, it all kind of plays into Mustard as well. So Pokemon Communications is going to be very good, and we'll talk about it a little bit further. Next up is Energy Switch. This one's a little bit controversial, but I thought that Energy Switch would be good in this deck. Of course, this deck is focused around the Single Strike special energies, but we are going to be hopefully manually attaching a basic fighting energy to our Vmax or to our Urshifu Single Strikes every turn. This means that after you get hit once or twice, and maybe you're in jeopardy of dying next turn, instead of just going ahead and discarding those energies, when you get knocked out, we have energy switch to sort of conserve those energies. And if you look, we're running a total of 11 energies in this deck, and there's no real way to get them out of the discard pile. Urshifu Vmax, his attack cost is 4. So obviously 4 times 3 or 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. So we don't necessarily have the energy, the amount of energy that we need to do 3 attacks, but E-Switch is going to help us with that since we're not playing any cards to get energy out of the discard pile. E-Switch is going to help us conserve our energies, and it's also going to help us, set up a second Urshifu Vmax if we need to switch into it without necessarily, just piling more energies onto it, which we definitely can do. So E-Switch seems good in this deck, not only to get an easier setup on the second Urshifu V or Vmax, but also to conserve our energies if we ever need to use the attack 3 times in a game, which we might oftentimes need to do. We really only need to use it once because, again, we have 11 energies. So as long as we get one E-Switch out, technically we should be able to get 3 attacks off with Urshifu Vmax in one game. It's kind of a stretch, but overall, I feel like it was the best option to conserve energy, and I felt like it was a better option than putting more energy into the deck. But I could be wrong. It's just sort of my opinion, so you guys can hate on me for that. And I guess now that we'll move on to the stadium cards. We're running 2 different stadiums and running one of each. Now we're running Martial Arts Dojo. Dojo, again, it's just another clutch damage modifier for this deck. We have the Special Strike Energies. We have the Embors, but we also have Martial Arts Dojo. This means that if we're behind on prize cards, we don't have Embor, maybe we don't have enough Single Strike Energies, we can, of course, play Martial Arts Dojo, which I believe boosts our damage by 40 if we're behind on prize cards and 10 if we're not. Either way, it should put us hopefully above the threshold of about 320 to 330, with a special energy attached to an Urshifu. And hopefully this means that we will be able to one-shot those VMAX Pokemon, even if we're a little bit low on our damage modifier resources like Embor or our Single Strike Energies. But for our Single Strike Energies, it should be fine just putting 2 on each of your Urshifu Vmax if you're playing 2 in a game. That's 40 plus damage for both your Urshifu Vmaxes. You have Embor as well, which hopefully if you get on your bench, it'll stay there. But if all of that fail-safes, we do have Martial Arts Dojo to put us over the edge. But other than Martial Arts Dojo, we are running the new Stadium card from Battle Styles for Single Strike. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it up so I don't get it wrong. Okay, so this one's called Tower of Darkness. It's a Single Strike card, although we don't really have necessarily a lot of ways to find it, but it is a Single Strike card. And it reads, once during your turn, each player may discard a Single Strike card from their hand, and they get to draw 2 cards. Now, this is actually pretty good in this list. This is good because we are probably going to have some extras when it comes to our Single Strike Pokemon. Like I said, if Embor is not really a factor, then we can sort of, use any of those 3 Pokemon from that line to discard to draw cards. If we have an extra Urshifu V, we can discard that. Or Houndoom or Houndour, right? So we have a lot of Single Strike cards that we can discard. Or even some of those supporters, but hopefully not the special energy. Either way, this is going to be a pretty good resource. If it's in our hand, it's just going to be a kind of a way that we can play it and go ahead and draw 2 extra cards while also thinning our hand, which is going to be very important with Mustard, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. There is a lot of Chaotic Swell running around, so these stadiums might not always be able to come into play, which is fine because we do have other ways to modify our damage output. But for the most part, I think with decks running a multitude of Giant Hearth, like Welder decks, or Power Plant sometimes, which isn't really a factor for our deck, running 2 stadiums in this deck honestly seems good. I think for the most part, they both fulfill their purpose in 2 different ways. But no matter what's happening in the game, I think they're both probably going to be pretty useful. So those are our 2 stadiums. And then we're only running 2 tool cards, Pokemon tools, in this deck, and those are Karate Belts. Now, I guess I'm just trying to think, is there another tool card? I guess we could run Vitality Band as more damage modifiers in this deck. I chose Karate Belt just because the attack cost for Urshifu Vmax is quite high. And Karate Belt, if we're behind on prizes, the fighting type Pokemon this card is attached to, its attack cost is 1 less. This is very good. This means that our Urshifu Vmax can potentially attack for 3 energies. If we're on our second Urshifu Vmax and one got knocked out, this can be very clutch for us, right? This means that technically, if we have a couple Houndours on our bench, or even just one, we could potentially set up that Urshifu Vmax, that second one, in just 1 turn. If it does have the Karate Belt, Karate Belt, in my opinion, is going to come in pretty clutch. It's just a card where, you kind of it gives this deck some comeback potential. And I think that's important. It goes along well with Martial Arts Dojo. This honestly makes your second Urshifu Vmax a lot more intimidating than your first one, especially since throughout the game you probably have more of an opportunity to set that second one up with things like Embor on the bench, Dojo, Karate Belts. It's honestly just going to be pretty clutch in my opinion. So 2 Karate Belts in this deck. I like Karate Belt. I think it's going to come in super clutch. But if you are choosing to run something like a Big Charm or a Vitality Band, then I can't disagree with that. Those are definitely cards that aren't going to be bad in this list. But for me, I preferred the Karate Belt. It seems like it works perfectly with Single-Strike Urshifu Vmax. Next up, we're going to take a look at the supporters. Now, of course, we got Research, Marnie, and Boss. These are 3 cards that are in almost every deck these days. We're running 3 Research and 2 Marnies. It seems a little bit low for a supporter count, but other supporters in this deck are going to be very, very useful in my opinion. We do have things like Dedenne. We have multiple Quick Balls. This is a deck where you're not necessarily going to be wanting to research out a lot of your cards. They're going to be pretty useful. Marnie, of course, can be kind of clutch. If you wanted to run a 2-3 Research and Marnie, like switch them around, then I agree with that completely. If you wanted to boost up and run a 4-3 or a 4-4 lineup, then I can't disagree with that as well. I haven't, of course, play tested this deck at all because it hasn't been out yet, so it might be worth running more Marnies or more Research. But we have a 3-2 lineup. They're great supporter cards for draw engine cards that are going to be in practically every deck. And then 3 Boss. I think 3 Boss is very important. You want at least 3. Boss's Orders is going to be very clutch for this deck for sure. I put an Eldegoss in there instead of running a 4th Boss. That seems to me to be fine. However, we don't necessarily have a way to search out our supporters, and the only way to really dig for it, like I said, would be to play Dedenne at the end of the game or an Eldegoss if we already discarded a Boss's Orders. So for me, this is a very decent supporter lineup. I think that you can definitely justify running like a 3-3-3. I think that might be fine. But I didn't really feel comfortable taking out any other cards in our deck, so that was kind of how that went. We're running 2 Guzma and Halas. Guzma Hala is actually pretty clutch in this deck for sure. Guzma Hala, you discard 2 cards from our hand, which is good to thin out our hand, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Mustard up next. But we get to grab a Stadium, a Special Energy, and a Tool card, and we really love all of those 3 things in this deck. So potentially, you could grab, you play Guzma Hala, you could grab Dojo, Karate Belt, and Special Energy, and that could really be the difference between you making an absolute comeback later in the game with that second Urshifu Vmax and just kind of set it all up with everything you need in one turn. Then you can use Houndoom, attach another Special Energy to it, and you're absolutely rolling. Manually attach some stuff. It's just a really good card in this list. I had it in the Rapid Strike Urshifu as well. It just honestly seemed like a really great card for a deck like this, which utilizes Special Energies, Stadiums, and Tool cards pretty heavily. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at the Mustard, the Single-Strike Mustard card. Mustard Single-Strike Stance is what it's called. It's sort of the new Mustard version. There's a Mustard for Rapid Strike as well, but I think the Single-Strike one is actually a bit better. It reads that you can only play this card if it's the last card in your hand. But the effect is very powerful. Search your deck for a Single-Strike Pokemon and put it onto your bench and then draw 5 cards. So this is actually a card that's going to come in clutch whenever we use it, and practically we're always going to want to use it. I think it can be very good to put that second Urshifu Vmax on your bench, but for the most part, I think that grabbing the Embor with it is going to be our best play, and it's honestly going to be our fastest, most efficient way to grab Embor. We can honestly just evolve, slowly into, or more slowly into Urshifu Vmax, because it's a stage 1, technically, instead of a stage 2 like Embor is. So I think Mustard's going to be very good for Embor. We run 2, but that's just sort of for consistency purposes. Now, it kind of makes a little bit more sense when you look at the rest of our deck and what we're playing. Pokemon Communications is good because if there's ever a Pokemon in our hand that we can't play, then of course that we switch it with a Pokemon that we can play, put it onto our bench. Quick Ball is very good because we search for a Pokemon to put on our bench and we discard a card from our hand, which is thinning out our deck. And the other item cards are also cards that we can kind of just burn if we need to. Like we can switch, we can Escape Rope, we can Energy Switch. These are cards that we can honestly play even though we don't need to play them. And this could really be the difference between us being able to play Mustard and not playing Mustard. So if you look, most cards in our deck are cards that we potentially should be able to thin out our hand with. It's not always going to work. You're not always going to have a hand that you can thin out to one card, and that last card being Mustard. But when you can, it's going to be very, very important, and it's going to hopefully be super clutch in this deck. I like Mustard. Again, it might not be the most viable card in this list, but I just love Mustard. I think that it potentially could be very, very powerful. And there definitely could be better ways to play this deck and better utilize Mustard. So if you want to go a full Mustard build, then definitely let me know what you would play for a full mustard build. But otherwise, it's definitely a card that I just absolutely love. I think it's going to be super clutch if you do get that like clutch mustard off late in the game, and you just get that M board down, draw 5 cards, find special energy, find switch, and then you just end up, just absolutely ripping people up late in the game. So this deck will be fun to play. I don't know if it'll be as viable as the Rapid Strike one overall, but it's definitely going to be super fun to get all the right cards that you need. Next up for energy, so we're running 11 in total, 4 special single strike energies, and then 7 just normal fighting energies. The single strike energy is actually really cool. So unlike the Rapid Strike one, it only counts as 1 energy. However, it counts as a fighting and a dark type energy. However, we play this card, of course, mainly only because when you attach this to a single strike Pokemon, that Pokemon does 20 more damage when it attacks. This is absolutely insane. It's obviously to the active Pokemon as well. Not that we're going to be able to hit the bench, but that's just something I wanted to point out. So this means that, like I said, we have 4, so we can put 2 on each of our Urshifu Vmaxes. That's 40 plus 270. That's 310. You have things like Embor. You have things like Dojo to potentially increase the damage modifiers even more. And that is hopefully enough to KO any Vmax Pokemon in the game right now. Of course, things like Eternatus Vmax, which are the most tanky Vmax Pokemon, that thing is weak to fighting anyway, so you don't even need to worry about that against Eternatus Vmax. Things like Pikarom, you don't need to worry about it because none of those Pokemon are living your hits ever. So this deck is going to eat up Pikaroms. And then I guess things like Colossal or Centiskorch, I suppose. They're not, you're not hitting for weakness against those, but those things have 320 and 330 respectively. So it's going to be a little bit easier to knock those things out anyway. The card is really good. It's gonna work out with the math. You have Karate Belt as well, so you probably don't even need 4 energies on Urshifu Vmax. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could go right with this deck, but it stands to be questioned whether everything will go right with this deck for sure. But anyway, guys, that's the list. So let me know. I'm probably not great at making deck lists. I sometimes leave it up to sort of people of the community to help me build lists. For these, I kind of wanted to put them into my, take things into my own hands. It probably didn't come out as good as some of you guys, would agree with. But let me know. Let me know, guys. Again, like I said, I'm not great at making deck lists, but this one was really fun to make. And I can kind of try to piece things together and see how things will work. But without playtesting and without really getting our hands on these decks, it's going to be hard to know exactly the best way to play them. And it's going to be hard to refine these lists. And I think both Rapid Strike and Single Strike Urshifu is going to take some time to refine them, to be completely honest. But, yeah, guys, that's going to wrap it up for the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys enjoyed my explanation of this otherwise probably not great deck list. Myself, I do prefer the Rapid Strike Urshifu Vmax, but the Single Strike one does look very fun. I know some people are very diehard on the Single Strike, and they could be right. Who knows? But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this now, I highly suggest that you guys go and check out my Rapid Strike Urshifu deck list that I posted a week ago. There'll be a link to it down below. Also, guys, if you're looking to play in a awesome weekly PTCGO tournament series, the Chill series is every Wednesday at 6 p.m., so definitely go check that out. Link to register for the next week's Chill series will be in the description down below. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time, and peace out.